On this week's show, the Georgia Southern Eagles, coming off their third straight loss and third straight game on the road, looking to rebound on the road at New Mexico State. We'll have interviews with Coach Summers and some of the players, as well as analysis, as we welcome you inside the Eagles Nest. And welcome inside the Eagles Nest. I'm your host, Josh Aubrey, being joined by Mike Anthony, sports editor and Georgia Southern beat writer for the Statesboro Herald. And Mike, the Georgia Southern Eagles conclude their 4-game road swing, the only school in all of college football that has 4 straight games on the road. The Eagles wrap things up at New Mexico State. This past week they were at Georgia Tech. We kind of figured that the game would be a couple touchdown deficit, or final would be about two touchdowns. It ended up being a little bit closer than that. Georgia Southern scores late to make it an 11-point win for Georgia Tech, but that was a game unlike a couple years ago when Georgia Southern played there, where Georgia Tech had to hold on and survive in the last few seconds. The lead was really never in jeopardy. They kind of cruised to the win. There were some positives for Georgia Southern, but overall, when you look back at that Georgia Tech game, what stands out in your mind?
Well, what stands out is how that game began, and Coach Tyson Summers will be the first one to say that this Georgia Southern team continues to kind of stumble out of the gate and not really hit the first quarter in high gear, and you saw that with Georgia Tech's first 3 possessions, a play of 50 yards or more on all 3 of their first 3 possessions. 2 of those go for a touchdown. The third one sets up a touchdown on the next play. Before you know it, you're down 2 scores, and with a team like Georgia Southern that's been struggling to score points, it's been struggling to move the ball, find an identity, it makes it even tougher when you're having to play from behind.
We're going to get into an interview that we did with Coach Tyson Summers and also preview the New Mexico State game in just a moment. But some of the things that were brought up in that interview were the fact that Georgia Southern, while they did play a little bit better offensively, the running game just isn't what it's been, and that is the big question mark. Why is it that it seems like Georgia Southern can't run the ball? I look back and say, if you got a guy like Matt Breida, he's rushed for over 3,000 yards in 2 years. If Adrian Peterson's junior year, we brought in a new coaching staff, and Adrian Peterson was averaging about 40 yards a game, I think people's heads would explode. I don't know that that's not the same thing that's going on right now, and it just seems like everybody's like, well, it's just not working out, and we're going to throw the ball a little bit more. But it seems kind of frustrating from a personnel standpoint when you see all this talent that's coming back at these positions, and it's just not resulting in the offense we're used to seeing on the field.
Yeah, and I don't think that the coaching staff's given up on running the ball. In fact, you did see a few things in the Georgia Tech game. The yardage not there, the scoring not there, the big plays still not really there, but you did see a few different strategies, I guess, to try to get those talented running backs into space with the ball, a screen here and there, a couple of swing passes, just some different designs on run plays that actually got to the outside that was able to showcase the speed of Breida, the moves of Wesley Fields. So I think that you'll look for more of that going forward. Not sure exactly what the plan is, if they're going to go exclusively to this different style of offense, kind of look more like a West Coast offense at times. But the main point is, whether you're running, passing, whatever, you have to identify the talent on the field. It's not hard to do with Georgia Southern. You can go pretty much anywhere and find a lot of talent. But as we said week after week, the key is to get them in space. You can have all the talent in the world, and if there's 2 defenders hanging off of you, as soon as you touch the ball, it's not going to work out.
Right. I think we go back to Chris Hatcher's early years here, when the year before with Brian Van Gorder, Jason Foster kind of became just another guy. And when Hatcher, with the offensive coordinator being the same that we have now, or the play caller being the same, in Rance Gillespie, they utilized what Jason Foster could do the first year or so after they came in, and what do you know? He wins the Peyton Award because they're running the ball. It just seems like you need to find a way. You've got one back in the backfield, it seems like most plays, where we've got Breida, Ramsby, and Fields, only one of them on the field at a time. Seems like maybe you're not utilizing your talent the best way. Maybe put those guys in at receiver, slot, or something, as you mentioned, to get them the ball. It looks like they might have tried to do a little bit, but I'd like to see a way to get all three of those guys back on the field at a time.
Right. Well, you want them in space with the ball. You can use others as decoys if you want to. Just something to, as you said, make everybody respect the talent that they have. But one thing I will give the coaching staff, I don't think it's a situation like you saw with Jason Foster in 2006 where he was just taken completely out of the game plan. It's anything but that. These play calls are going to Breida, to Fields, to Ramsby. They're giving them a heavy load. It's just that nothing's coming of it. Whether it's blocking, whether it's scheming, whatever it is, they're giving opportunities to these guys. It's just that there's not anywhere to run to. So I think that once they figure some things out, hopefully we saw some shades of it in the Georgia Tech game, they'll be able to continue giving them a steady 15, 20 carries and just give them a little more room to operate.
Well, if ever there was just what the doctor ordered, you'd think that if Idaho can score 55 points against New Mexico State, Georgia Southern should be able to do something similar if they're able to work some things out and score a bunch of points. I don't think people are going to care. I don't think people care right now if you score 45 points, throwing the ball, running the ball, whatever it is. I think what's worrying people is that if you get to where you're averaging 20, 21, 22 points a game, that's just not what Georgia Southern's used to. And if you're holding people to 10 or 11, that will be good, okay.
Well, that's how it was at the beginning of the year, but now not so much. The defense getting a little bit dinged up, especially in the secondary. There were new faces to begin with. Now some of them are finding themselves on the injury report and not able to do it. You got to throw more inexperienced young guys in there, and a tough one this week for those young guys is New Mexico State. We know about Larry Rose running the ball, but this is an Aggie team that can throw it too.
Yeah, mention again, what Georgia Southern has to look out for with New Mexico State. They have put some points on the board. They put a lot of points on Kentucky earlier this year, so you know they're capable, especially at their place where there's also a little bit of that altitude that you have to get used to in the desert that a lot of these Georgia Southern players aren't used to.
It's a dry altitude.
All right, well, you got a running game to look out for with New Mexico State. We've seen them here. We've seen them at their place. They've given Georgia Southern some trouble at their place before. Hopefully that won't happen. We had a chance to talk with Tyson Summers and some of the players about heading to Las Cruces.
I think the big thing, Doug and his staff, I think have done a good job, obviously. And, you see those guys really being able to turn around. The first thing that jumps out at you on the tape in New Mexico State is they play really hard and they're a physical group. Obviously they've got the running back. Larry Rose ran for 1,700 yards last year, on their offensive side of the ball, and they're leading our conference right now in passing. So when you've got those two things and you've got a 1-2 punch of being able to run the ball and being able to throw it, that's going to make things difficult for the defense. When you take a look, them defensively, obviously their defensive coordinator, was a head coach at Boston College a couple of years ago, certainly knows what he's doing. They're 4 down front, and again, they play a mixture of zone stuff, but they're going to try to load the box and make sure that you don't run it. That's what they've done versus every team, and it's certainly a heavy pressure team. So we've got to be able to match those things and be able to play at our best.
Fourth game of the 4-game road swing. It's got to be kind of tiring for you guys. I mean, luckily you only had to go to Atlanta, but this is a pretty far trip for you.
Yes, sir. Well, I think you don't want to make any excuses, and you certainly don't want to find other things to place blame. There's enough things that I've got to correct and got to get fixed with it. And so again, it'll be a 3.5-hour flight for us out there, and we do have a quick turnaround with that coming back the next week, and so we're doing our best to make sure that we give our players the best schedule we can to get them off their feet and give them some time while still being able to prepare for both teams at the same time.
I can't wait to play New Mexico State, but I also heard that it's hard to breathe out there, so I'll be preparing myself mentally for that also. But other than that, I'm excited. It's next man up. Next team up that we got to play, and they're in our way. We and myself firmly, we go into every game believing that we can win, just like we went into Georgia Tech believing that we can win, and New Mexico State won't be any different. We will be going in looking forward to the win and knowing that we have to actually, work hard and beat that team to win.
It's going to be a good game. We got to go up there. We got to play against their crowd and their fans. We just got to go out there and have a big game. We know they'll have a good passing game this year. I think they're leading the Sun Belt in passing yards this year, so we got to really get after the quarterback. It's different. The altitude is hard to breathe up there. So we're going up there Friday. I think we're getting the practice in, so we'll be fine. We'll get to work around in and run a couple plays and stuff to get used to it a little bit.
It is a little different than Statesboro, I would say, or any teams that we play so far at their stadiums. But, the altitude does play a fact, but I don't think that's really going to affect us. I know we're getting to practicing on Friday, and I think that should help us out a little bit, but other else than that, I don't think it's going to really affect us. I think it's just important to win overall. We lost 3 games. Every game we try to win is, that's our goal. We're trying to win every game, and we're trying to do everything right so we can play good and beat New Mexico State. Don't get me wrong, New Mexico State's a really good team. They have a lot of athletes and they play extremely hard. I think it's a team that plays the hardest, and from what I watched on film, so we have to do the little things right and get on track and play hard.
All right, Mike, it's now time for bold predictions. We give what we think the scores are. I think we were both very close last week with the Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern score. This time around, how do you see it going for the Eagles?
Well, I think that you're going to see plenty of points scored in this game. Georgia Southern's defense has shown it can be dominant, but as we mentioned, a little bit of attrition taking place with some injuries. They've definitely been apt to give up the big play from time to time. New Mexico State, a team that's shown that they can take advantage of those lapses, put some big plays on the board. So I think you see Georgia Southern's offense get a little bit more room to work, put a few more points on the board. I see a similar game to last week, only in the Eagles' favor. I think that they're the ones who jump out to an early lead. I don't think they'll run away from New Mexico State. The Aggies will continue to pursue. They'll get some points on the board, but I think that Georgia Southern finally breaks this losing streak, keeps New Mexico State at arm's length. I'm going to go with 31-24.
I'm going with 44-21 with the Eagles getting a good offensive output all the way around and maybe even get some points going through the ground and big runs as well. Well, Mike, before we go, give us an update on some of the other sports going on at Georgia Southern. You have some volleyball and soccer among others.
Yeah, volleyball off to a good start. A couple of games canceled a couple weeks ago because of the hurricane, losing a couple of home matches there that they'll make up later on. But they hit the road last week. They split in Alabama. They beat Troy but lose to South Alabama, avenging the Jags at a loss in a match in Statesboro earlier this season. The volleyball team comes back home this week. They'll have the 2 Texas teams, Arlington, Texas State. They're coming to visit, and at a 4-2 mark, if the Eagles can get a couple of good home wins, they'll be, if not in the driver's seat, right there at the top of the conference where you want to be about at the midway point. As for soccer, we mentioned the women's team burning through their schedule, unfortunately not racking up a ton of wins, now just 2-6 in conference play, a tough loss to App earlier this week or over the weekend. The men's team, a very impressive draw against Coastal Carolina. I know some people don't like ties, but against Coastal Carolina, that's a national caliber team. I know that the team's happy to get a result out of that. So 1-0-1 in conference play for the men. They're about to really crank things up. They have Hartwick, a power in this conference over the last couple of seasons. They're coming up on the schedule soon, as well as a trip to Clemson going back to ACC play.
All right, well, don't forget, next week we'll have the early show because of the Appalachian State game being on Thursday night, so we'll have our show for you next week on Wednesday. That'll wrap things up. For Mike Anthony, I'm Josh Aubrey. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you again next week.